I want to push things along to reducing parental anxiety. We touched on unification and collaboration as part of this. I'm going to kick this off with a story. We all agreed prior to this that we'd share something, and we talk about the coach as a leader and the impact of that. I remember working in a professional academy environment in the UK where obviously there is a huge amount of anxiety for parents, and there is a lot of pressure on these children, and at times they are selected far too soon. It's something that never sat overly well with me. But I remember a story of a player who was really struggling to grasp something tactically and was playing in a position as part of their individual plan to help them learn the game. And this particular player had a really overbearing dad. He was one of those guys who's really, really nice and always overly friendly and super interested in his son's development. But at times you were sort of questioning, some integrity there and some challenges. And what was never in question was how much he cared for his son. And the instance that I recall is getting onto the grass with this player and literally standing next to him to help him understand the principles of defending as a centre back in the game of football. And when there's no pressure on the ball, we can afford to step forward. And if there's pressure on the ball, we can step forward. And if there's no pressure on the ball, we might need to be on our back foot. And the dad spoke to me afterwards and talked about the impact that direct line of coaching had on him. And then we started to break down some barriers. Obviously, the child had benefited from the intervention, but we started to break down some barriers around why this guy was so stressed and why he was so anxious. And it was essentially fear of release from a program, fear of deselection. And the guy broke down. He was really upset, and he started revealing how much he cared and how much he was on top of this process all the time. And we're saying, you need to trust us and trust the program. And the kid stayed in the program for a very long time. So it was one of those where it was really revealing when you see the sense of desire to get involved and anxiety on the sidelines. Have you guys got either thoughts on that or similar, I guess, ideas around how you can sort of break it down and really sort of try and get past the exterior at times of the parent who's really trying to be overbearing because they care, but perhaps they're steering their kid to a point where the kid's paralyzed and isn't really learning because they're so worried about what's going on that side of the pitch.
I've got another story that shed lights on this idea, and I got an invitation to sit down with a family, and they had a few different kids, and one of the boys was a motocross rider, and this young fella was starting to experience some performance anxiety around turning up. And he was young, he was 12 years of age. And he was turning up on the weekends. And if you know anything about motocross, most of what happens is within a performance context. So funnily enough, there's a lot of these riders don't actually just get on their bike and go and ride with their mates with nobody watching, which is another story. We need to increase the amount of time that kids are spending learning. But in this particular sport, it's a lot of performance. And so this particular dad, he did come down on his boy quite a lot. And as you described, Dave, he was how we would suggest is slightly overbearing. And so I think we can spend time helping parents to dig into some of their stories, because I know I always go there first. It's like, let's talk about some of your experiences as a young person playing sport. And it turned out that he grew up in South Otago, and his dad drove trucks and was never around during the week. And then Saturday morning, dad would be home, and there was 4 boys, and all the boys would get in the car, and dad would take them off to rugby. And what it is for, it goes back to that question in the minds of this dad was, we're going out to win. This is what rugby is for. It's a competition, and therefore the outcome is the most important thing. And so his entire childhood was spent growing up around this narrative of sport is for winning. And when we grow up around these things, that's the beliefs that we hold, and we pass them down to our kids. And so, but when you can spend time just understanding parents' stories, then it gives you opportunity to talk into them and to provide alternatives, and just to really understand what it is that they need to create better environments for their boys. So I think, again, it's really valuing the job that can be done around those conversations and then creating space. And that's not an easy thing to do. Coaches are time poor, and we don't see our athletes and our kids for long periods of time. But I think it is a matter of just prioritizing this, creating space, and I think we can have a really big impact.
And what about you, Reed?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. So I was at a club in back here in the States in Ohio, that high pressure, high stakes, a lot of National League teams, a lot of kids getting college looks. We're talking really, really high performance group. And with it came high performance parents who were type A personalities, very driven, very successful in their own lives. And similar concept, they really saw sport as winning and they wanted their kids to win. And I became the one in the club. I was a director of coaching that all the other directors would call and say, I got this parent I need you to sit down with, Reed. And one day, one of them said, you're the fixer. You're the one that talks to the parents. You're the parent whisperer. And I was like, well, I want to explain something to y'all. I'm just break down for you what I do. I listen. I don't dismiss them. I don't tell them that, let me do my job. You stay on your side of the field and keep your mouth shut. What's your issue? Why are you having this issue? And Craig said, I have these conversations to find out a little bit more about them. And a lot of times they just want to be heard. They just want to be a part of it. They're a lot of times they insert themselves where they think they can, because we haven't given them a role to play. We haven't included them, like we talked about from the beginning, in this experience. And so the parents are just standing on that sidelines thinking that they're just supposed to be there to keep their mouth shut. So they'll just start inserting themselves into the conversation until you give them a role, or you invite them into this in more meaningful ways. And then they want to learn from you as well, because they've made a new connection with you because you listened to them. You had empathy and you heard their story. I did it when I was very young. I was coaching this team. I was probably 21 at the time, and I was the head coach. But a dad who'd coached the team for 3 or 4 years prior to me, he was my assistant, right? We knew who the real coach was. He was just letting me, he was letting me ease into it. But we get a couple games into the season, and I've got this keeper, and he's like Timmy Howard was back in the heyday, man. He'd stand on his head and make saves from anywhere. He was saving the world, And then we get third or fourth game, and he's like a sieve. The balls are just going through his legs, and he's not even diving. And I turned to my coach and I said, what's going on with the keeper? He's a different person. He says, look behind the net. And the dad is camped out right behind the net, and he's in his kid's ear the whole time. And I said, well, Bill, the assistant coach, Bill, what do we do? He goes, no, what do you do? You need to have a conversation with that parent. I said, I'm only like 20 something. He said, no, you need to have a conversation with that parent. Well, as it turns out, just explaining to that father the difference it made for him to be on the sideline enjoying the game versus in his son's ear, and how much his son just wants so badly to show him how good he is, that if he just releases it for a minute and lets his son enjoy the moment, it can change everything. And it was a life-changing conversation for me as a 20-something to have to confront a parent about it. But he just wanted to be heard. He wanted a little bit of direction.